What's up everybody, Super Dorks fan here for another car review. This is of course the 1986 Chevrolet Corvette. Huge thanks to Harrison Auto Sales for hooking me up with this very cool Corvette to review for you guys today. So, why the heck am I reviewing an 86 Corvette? Because it's really cool actually. Now that they're almost 30 years old, they actually, to me, seem to have a little bit of a charm now, and it's not just some old rundown Corvette. It's actually like a classic now, and I think it's really cool looking actually, especially considering how cheap these are. This one's listed at around $7,000 and you get this awesome cool body that, I mean, it's the Corvette shape is so iconic, and it's just unmistakable. You still get all kinds of stares and looks whenever you're driving around in this thing, and I think it looks really cool, you know, with the flip-up headlights and everything. It's just screams 80s, screams just charming and just character. I love the way they look. Right, for the interior of the 86 Corvette. Well, I was prepared to give this car a pass because it's 30 years old. Well, how much can you really expect? But it's actually not bad. So, first things first, getting into this car, the seats, you like sit down really low in it, and you like plop down in these seats, which are very soft and cushy and comfortable, and feel very much like they're out of the 80s. But they're actually quite supportive, these seats. They have really good thigh bolsters, really good torso support. I mean, the torso bolsters are a little bit small. I wish they just came out a little bit more, but they do hold you in. But if you're a larger person, you'd spill right over these because they're not very tall. But otherwise, they're actually pretty good seats, and I'm actually kind of surprised. Next is the steering wheel, which is very funky as well, and these spokes, they're kind of at like a 4 and 8 position, and that's kind of a nice way to hold this wheel, though. Strangely enough, just driving down the road, it actually feels really natural and really good. And of course, you have a really good 9 and 3 grip if you want. There's no spokes in your way. You just grip onto the wheel, and it's a nice thick wheel, by the way. No notches or anything fancy, of course. Just a basic round wheel, but it gets the job done. It's very cool. And next, another thing that's very cool is these gauges. Totally digital, and they just look so cool. Those really scream 80s. You have the speedometer that goes up to an astronomical 85 miles per hour, which is the federal mandate back then in those dark ages. You know, you have a little customizable display there in the middle that you can change with this little control center over here, and it's a very cool gauge cluster, I gotta say. And this interior, by the way, it's held up fairly well. This one only has 55,000 miles. There are a few rattles and things. The center console won't close all the way, and the door trim's falling off the passenger door here a lot. But aside from that, I mean, everything is actually still holding up really well. And obviously this one's had an easier life than a lot of them, I'm sure. But still very cool nonetheless that it's held up so well. But come along to the center of the dashboard here. Again, 1980s. So you have typical GM parts bin volume knobs and stuff from the 80s. But they actually have a pretty decent feel to them, to be perfectly honest. They feel better than the 90s plastic and the other Corvettes that were slightly newer, this later C4s and C5s. I actually think this is higher quality, crazy enough. And yeah, a cassette deck, of course, because that's about as sweet as you could get back then. But it's a Bose sound system, and listening to the radio, it sounds really good actually. So I can't really knock the sound system. It's pretty good. You have automatic climate control, which again was, you know, kind of decadent for the 80s, and that's very nice to have. Very straightforward, easy to use. Then you come down to the center here, and you have your two tiny little cup holders, and I don't even know if I'm supposed to be calling them cup holders. The one is round and could fit a drink that maybe comes in a kid's meal at McDonald's or something. Happy Meal size cup in there. This one in the back has some kind of weird bracket. I don't know if that's supposed to double as an ashtray or what, but you can't really put anything in there except coins or something. And then you have a little tray here in the back that you can fit some stuff in, but it also houses these knobs that protrude out for your power mirrors and your seat controls. So that's interesting. And you'll also find your window controls there. And then the center console doesn't close. It's actually fairly shallow, but then it like drops off this cliff, and then you have this super deep, tiny little narrow part, and there's a little set of tools and stuff in here as well, and that's also where you'll find your rear hatch release. When you press that, it makes a cool sound and it just raises up. It feels like you're hitting like the ejector seat button in like a James Bond car or something. Very cool feeling. And just some other oddball stuff I'd like to point out about this car. Your windshield wiper controls are on the door, That's a first. And also your e-brake lever here is on the left-hand side of the seat. Very unique. And while we're down in this general area, this is the narrowest footwell I have ever encountered. I can just barely fit my 2 feet side by side in there, but someone with larger feet, or if you're wearing work boots, forget it. I don't know what you'd have to do. You just would have literally no foot room. That's normally not something you have a problem with in any car, but this car, yes, very narrow footwells, just to keep in mind. And overall, though, I mean, it's a nice interior for what it is and for the time period it was in. I really can't knock it a whole lot. But you know, those two little cup holders and those cubbies are the only storage spaces in this car. You have the rear hatch area, you know, the trunk that is carpeted nicely, and you know, you can fit a decent amount of stuff in there. Although if you do plan to keep your glass roof in the back here, like this one is set up, then that obviously will inhibit the amount of stuff you can carry in there, but you can take that out. That's easily removable. And yeah, so I mean, otherwise it's very, very cool. Another random thing though that I forgot to mention is on the passenger side here, you have this big pad that I don't believe even holds an airbag. It's just a pad, I guess, so you don't smack your face in the event of an accident. But it protrudes out so far. I don't know if they just did that for safety or what, but that looks really bizarre. It's like someone like only pushed it in halfway and didn't finish installing it. Really bizarre. So yeah, I mean, it's all charming stuff that doesn't make any sense. It's stupid, but it's kind of funny, and you can't help but like it. So yeah, that's about it for this interior. But let's start it up and see how it drives. Of course, you just have basic key, and this is the ignition key, and then you have another key to unlock the door, because these had this weird immobilizer thing back in the 80s. So you just slip that in. It starts up in very 80s fashion with that sound of the V8 engine. Alright, so setting off the 1986 Chevy Corvette. So, first thing you notice, the driving position is interesting. So you actually don't feel like you're sitting quite as low to the ground as you do in some of the other Corvettes. And it's interesting because this actually, it drops down more in the front. The hood and everything drops down nicely. So you actually have a pretty good view forward. It's better than the C5s and the C6s as well. And so it doesn't feel quite as large or quite as wide. Those ones are like, I'm scared to move anywhere because it's like so huge. This one feels a lot more manageable to me. And maybe I'm just used to larger hoods now with the Mustang, I don't know. But this really, it seems easy to drive so far. And visibility is very good. You have obviously the huge, large rear glass, and the side windows are nice and large. You do have some fairly thick B-pillars that could be a little bit of a problem, but with that glass hatch, the way it goes around, you really kind of have the blind spot eliminated by that. And so cruising along in this bumpy park road though, it's bumpy, and this car is also showing its age on this road because everything just rattles and creaks in the suspension, and you hear various parts of the car rattling and stuff like that as well. So definitely not very refined. I will say though, it kind of keeps out the outside world pretty well. It's you can't hear too much outside, and if it wasn't for all the creaks and rattles, it would sound fairly refined, although it's super bouncy ride. As you can see as I'm going over these bumps, very bouncy and just boing boing boing. It's again, that could be partly because of the age, but I think it's just mostly because of the 80s. Alright, so being that this car is nearly 30 years old, I'm going to take it pretty easy. But let's turn on to this back road here and see how it does. Just have it in drive, and here we go. Okay, it gets up and goes pretty well, I gotta say. Man, this thing is not slow. You would think from the specifications that it would be slow though. This 5.7 liter V8 engine puts out, wait for it, 230 horsepower. Yes, sir. And 330 pounds-feet of torque as well. So the torque is really what gets you going, and that's obviously a healthy amount of torque, 330 foot-pounds, and gets this car moving really well. I mean, this car did high 13-second quarter-mile times back in the day. Nice GT500. But yeah, so it's a pretty good performer, I must say. And so I'm on these corners here, and one thing immediately you notice when you're putting this car into corners is this steering has such wonderful feel. It is a power steering unit, but it almost feels like it's manual steering just because of how much road feel you get and the wonderful heavy weightiness of it. It's really a nice thing to use. And the brake and pedal feel are all pretty mushy and dead. I mean, the throttle response, you really got to stab this thing like you mean it, and that'll get it up and going. But there's no delicate throttle response in this car. It's all just very old-fashioned. So going around this tight corner I always take, and it actually it's a little scary, but it holds its own. It has it's 3,300 pounds, this car, and it actually it's okay. I gotta say, I'm a little nervous because this suspension's 30 years old, but it does okay. You know, you have a low center of gravity, and you know, it's a very lively, I would say. So yeah, I'm gonna drive this car around for a little while longer here though, and I'll come back and give you some updated impressions. Alright, so I've been driving this car for a little while longer here, and it's an experience. That's a good way to put it. It's an experience. It is fun, but it just, I mean, I know if I were able to push it, I could probably get used to the handling, but it feels really good at low speeds. But anytime you push it anything spiritedly, it gets a little bit sketchy, and it's exciting though. I will say that it is exciting, but it's not very confidence inspiring, and it's very funny. And nothing in this car is delicate. You don't do anything delicately. Nothing is sensitive or precise. It's like, well, here's a gas pedal, and you mash it like this to go faster, and you know, here's the brake pedal, you have to push it all the way like this, and then it starts to slow down. It gets the suggestion. Nothing immediate, of course, because we're not dealing with very high-tech brakes, but it does slow itself. And you know, the transmission is not that ride again, potholes and stuff, forget it. This transmission is you know, it's actually fairly smooth, and you know, I stomped on it immediately at downshift, so it's fairly intelligent though, I will say. It's a 4-speed with overdrive, and obviously no manual shiftability really, but it's not bad actually for an automatic. There's much worse automatic transmissions, especially in this time period. This one is nothing to really cry about. So yeah, I'll do another little acceleration here just to see what it's like. And wheel spin, it likes to spin the wheels. Oh man, this thing it's a little too easy to spin the wheels. It's really funny. This is just so imprecise and just it's fun though. Look at this huge smile on my face. I'm laughing and just having a blast. It's just really fun. Here's some more corners here. We can play around and boing with the suspension again. But it's actually a pretty fun car to just drive around. Even if you are driving spiritedly, you just have to stay on your toes, obviously. And it's funny because 3,300 pounds doesn't sound like a whole lot, but this car actually feels pretty heavy. It feels like a big old brick you're chucking into corners and stuff. Another thing I have to mention is, now, you know, obviously this car's from the 80s, so I can't really knock this, I guess, but for someone buying this in 2015, you just gotta keep in mind there's like no safety features, there's no airbags. Like I said, they were generous enough to pad the dashboard and stuff so that you don't hit your head quite as hard. You have seat belts, and you know, that's it though. I mean, you get in an accident in this thing and forget about it, so definitely something to keep in mind. If you plan to drive one of these a lot, but for a nice little weekend cruise or something, it's a lot of fun. And you know, I said for the price, this thing's like $7 grand, and you know, obviously prices vary greatly depending on the condition and stuff, but you can have a lot of fun for very little money. And like I said, you get lots of people looking at you, and it's still a sports car, you know, so $7 grand for a sports car is a pretty sweet deal regardless of what time period it's from. So yeah, I mean, overall though, it's a really nice little car, you know, and I don't think I would ever, you know, own one or anything like that, but it's certainly fun to drive around for a day. It's very cool, and I'm so excited. It's cool to let me know what you guys think about doing different stuff like this, doing a 30-year-old Corvette and other random things like that, because I'm excited to hear what you guys think about this. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Take care.